In the meantime, I do want to talk more about these protests, the situation in general, and de escalation tactics. I want to bring in Adam Swart, the founder of what's known as Crowds on Demand. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a company that's been around for more than a decade, providing everything from paid protesters to hired paparazzi and fans. Crowds on Demand helps organize rallies, demonstrations, PR stunts, and a whole lot more. Adam, thank you so much.
Welcome to the video, everyone. This is Justin Paul. Just doing a quick reaction here to interview of the co-founder of Crowds on Demand, which I'm just now finding out about Crowds on Demand. But as you was just hearing in the introduction there to this clip, they're a company who organizes protests, paparazzi, fans, events and stuff like that. So this is putting truth behind, there are organizations out here um, that, help you fake it until you make it, or help put together protests and stuff like that. So, and these people who they help put together, they pay these people. So they can, pay to set up, fans for if someone's out and about to, try to make a person seem like they're more famous than they actually are. They can pay to set up paparazzi, and I'm pretty sure at this point, they build a lot of relationships and have a lot of influence. So, this just shows here, you really can't believe everything that you're seeing. A lot of stuff is smoke and mirrors, but I'll be interested to hear what he says here.
Much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, pleasure to be.
All right, and first off, the big question that I want to start by asking you before we get into those de escalation tactics. Now, we are talking about paid protesters and demonstrators with your company, but we're not talking, and I do want to make this distinction, about folks who are violent and confronting ICE officers screaming at them, correct?
Well, Josh, that's a very clear distinction to make. Crowds on Demand does not engage in any unlawful forms of protest. That obviously includes violence and vandalism, but that also includes blocking a road without a permit, right? That is an unlawful form of protest. We are a law abiding American company. We have no interest in doing that. We live in a country that celebrates First Amendment expression, that gives us the right to lawfully protest. There's absolutely no excuse or reason to protest unlawfully.
And you have been tracking all of this here, of course, as your company was created. Can you kind of break down how the use of maybe paid protesters and demonstrators has changed kind of over the last decade or so?
Well, it is troubling that there are some groups that appear to be using paid demonstrators to create chaos on the streets. Some evidence of that includes like the bricks that people have been distributing on the streets of Los Angeles, tactical gear, right? When you see people distributing mass tents that look all the same, it's obvious that there's money behind it, but that's not money behind lawful expression, that's money behind unlawful expression. So I've noticed that more and more groups are wading into that. Crowds on Demand, and I have sought it myself to be a part of the solution, not the problem. So I've been outspoken in the media saying, yes, we need protections for protesters, and we also need protections to make sure that that protests are lawful, right? There can be no law and order without justice. There can be no justice without law and order. And I feel that that very much applies when it comes to protests.
So, as he was just saying, someone's buying the bricks, someone's buying like tactical gear and masks and things like that that's being passed out to people who are out there protesting. So it's somebody that's definitely putting money behind it. And he was basically saying that his organization, they don't believe in unlawful protest, or, protests that are going to, cause escalated tensions and stuff like that. More so on the lines of peaceful protests and stuff like that. So he just did, he's on here to speak up for, the industry of paid protest, and basically trying to say it's a difference between, those who put their money behind, people who are going to go out there and do things that can really escalate tensions, and those that are just out there to, peacefully protest and, try to get their voices heard. So that's what he's basically trying to do, is just to make that distinction.
And what you're looking at right now is some of the video from the past several days coming in from Minneapolis and other cities as these protests draw. We're talking hundreds upon hundreds of people. And some of these videos actually show people outside of one of the hotels where those ICE agents and officers are believed to be staying. So things getting a little complicated there, and at some points becoming actually violent. So based on your experience, what are maybe the core best practices for de-escalating these protests that go on for days and days like we've seen here?
Well, number one, Josh, is that de escalation is a two-way street. It helps if both the authorities and the protesters are interested in de escalation. Number one thing that I like to do if there is any tension is to try to develop a point of contact on the other side. So if you're leading a protest, right, what you wanted, and you feel that the officers are not being fair in dealing with your protesters, then escalate it. Find a higher level officer, find a chief of police, a captain, a lieutenant, and advise them that while you respect the law, we also kind of insist that our First Amendment rights be respected, right? Similarly, if you're the authorities, you need to, and you feel that the protesters are going beyond the pale of what is legal, right? Then try to develop a liaison with someone in the protest group, if possible, who is reasonable, who can negotiate. So in the incident that was viral, right, with this awful killing, right? The ICE agents could have attempted to reason with this person, maybe find someone else in the protester group and say, well, look, can you tell her that she's got to get her car out of the road because what she's doing is impeding federal officers and she could face serious charges if she continues, right? So giving people the opportunity to retreat from a situation, to extricate themselves from a situation, is a very important part of de-escalation. And I am not seeing nearly enough of that, both by either by authorities or by the protesters.
Talking about transparency, things of that nature, accountability, all of that, how does that factor into de escalating these situations before they do escalate into violence?
Well, one part of transparency is, again, it's giving people kind of forewarning that a protest is going to happen. So we're talking about, of course, still a lawful protest, but if you advise authorities, if you're going to have a 200, 300, 400 person protest in a residential neighborhood, advising authorities that this is what we're going to do can also help, because what I've seen is that the most problematic incidents are often when the protest sort of shows up by surprise. There's a small number of officers, they feel overwhelmed, and that sometimes leads to officers being more rash in their decision making. So part of it is you asked about transparency of giving people warning. Moreover, on the officers' side, the officers should be very clear. Number one, giving people the opportunity to exit a situation, drive away, leave, right? But number two, being transparent about saying, if you stay, this is what is going to happen, right? And be very clear, speak with respect, speak with dignity.
As you watch kind of these protests come together and you see there are
So, what he's, was saying there is, there should be better communication between organizers and liaison from the police. Liaisons from both sides should definitely speak. And, if there's going to be a protest, to forewarn authorities that, hey, we're planning on protesting in this area, and so they can have the adequate numbers of people to kind of keep things orderly and stuff like that, which, so that's all clear-headed, stuff. But we do know that in a lot of these situations, clear heads do not prevail. And most times, there's going to be a pop-up type of protest, and authorities are unaware. And by the time they become aware, they're undermanned. And again, like he was saying, that makes the officers feel, overwhelmed and stuff like that. So, great suggestions, definitely. And I don't think enough people are going to actually see this to make those suggestions count. But those are some great suggestions, definitely.
A lot of different officers, law enforcement that are there. We're talking, of course, about the federal agents who are on the scene. How exactly do law enforcement, how do they go about necessarily protecting the public's right to protest, but also ensuring that the people there do stay safe? I have to imagine it's kind of a fine balance.
Absolutely, and those are not mutually exclusive. Those actually complement each other. When our society is at the best, we can have very expressive First Amendment displays while preserving public safety. And I think the way that you do it is you draw a clear line. You have transparent communication with the protesters saying, we will protect, not only will we allow you to protest, we will protect you from counter protesters if you do it the lawful way. But if you break the law, we're going to punish the law breaking, right? So, number one is to treat people as individuals, right? So, you showed just a couple minutes ago protesters kind of storming a hotel. Well, that is illegal. That is trespassing. And it could potentially be something even more serious, right? So to say, hey, if you want to protest outside this hotel, you have every right to do so, right? But if you are going to storm into private property, that is grounds for arrest. So I think is not done enough is that the authorities are defaulting to using tear gas and all of these sorts of things, and instead of distinguishing between the protesters who are engaging lawfully, right, who you may or may not agree with, and the protesters who are actually doing something unlawful. And it's the people who are doing something unlawful that need to be held accountable. And I'm not seeing enough of the authorities distinguishing between the two.
I feel like sometimes that can be hard to distinguish between the two because the bad actors are going to blend in with the people who are really just there to protest, and they're going to make sure that they dressing similar. And trust me, they're when you have a group of people as you're seeing here on the screen, I mean, unless you're there and hearing everything, and even if you're there and hearing everything, you can have a sprinkle of bad actors in with a sprinkle of people who are trying to peaceful protest. And you know like I say, man, it's some I can imagine that it's hard to distinguish between the two, especially in the heat of the moment when you're out there actually in the action, and not necessarily in a nice home or office setup, speaking to someone over a webcam interview. So I agree with him with some things, but I just don't feel like it's just that as easy as he's saying to try to decipher. Okay, well, this is the people who I need to be, hitting with tear gas, and these are the people who are peaceful protesting. Again, I feel like the bad actors know that they have to go in and they have to blend in. They have to really blend in with people who are there peaceful protesting, and then at the end of the day, they're all going to be bunched into the same group, with them doing that. So but great suggestions. Again, I'm just not getting educated on crowds on demand. Now I know, anytime I see paparazzi, or anytime I see, people out there who, like a little setup type of thing, like a photo op, or video op type thing, these are the type of organizations who set these things up. And now is this is their season. When something happens and tensions arise, this is when they start making their money for their organization. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out, guys. If you like my content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. This is Justin Paul. Peace.